Welcome to High Low, a video series on AutoTrader where we take two vehicles of a similar philosophy, but one being on the higher end of the price spectrum and one on the lower end. Electrification has been the buzzword within the automotive realm for the past decade or so, and well, we've seen a bit of a downturn in electric car sales, and in South Africa the adoption rate has been glacial, to say the least. And as motoring writers, we've been saying for many years that plug-in hybrids are a great solution for mobility, and with the downturn in diesel sales in Europe, thanks mostly to legislation, that means that the vehicles coming to South Africa now, in terms of diesel powertrains, are few and far between. So that leaves the plug-in hybrid as the fuel-efficient way of people getting around. And today we've got two plug-in hybrids, one at the high end of the pricing spectrum and one at the lower end of the pricing spectrum, namely the BMW X3 and the BYD Sea Lion 6. We have two brands represented here today. One needs very little introduction, and I think this one to my left-hand side needs quite an introduction. You see, this is a BYD, a Chinese brand, stands for Build Your Dreams. Slightly cringy brand name, but this is a serious company. It's the biggest producer of electric cars on the planet. It's overtaken the mighty Tesla. And this particular model here, I think, is the type of product that South Africans could get behind. You see, this isn't an EV. This is a plug-in hybrid called the Sea Lion 6. Now, we thought the best way to test this new Sea Lion 6 is to see what it's like against a more expensive, more established, locally produced product in the form of the vehicle to my right-hand side, the BMW X3. This has got a lot of things going for it, namely brand heritage. BMW South Africa has been in existence and producing cars in South Africa for a very long time. And the X3 is built right here in Roslyn in Gauteng. And this hybrid 30E version, South Africa is the only market in the world that produces this particular model. So wherever you are in the world, your 30E X3 comes from South Africa. So safe to say the BYD has its hands full competing. Even though we aren't traditionally comparing these cars, it will still have its hands full trying to impress us against the likes of the X3. And I suppose all that there's left to do is to drive both of the vehicles back to back and see what they're like out on the road. So here we are aboard the BYD Sea Lion 6 all-wheel drive. Now, headline figures on this car, well, they're pretty impressive. There's a 1.5 litre turbocharged petrol engine and two electric motors in this particular model, one at the rear axle and one at the front axle. They all send the power through an eCVT, so an electronic continuously variable transmission. Combined outputs are quite impressive. The car weighs just over 2 tons, but there's certainly plenty of power, 238 kilowatts and 550 newton meters of torque, which is quite a bit more than you'd get from your average family SUV. Now, the other big plus about this car is its combination of performance and efficiency. But I have to say, having driven the car, there is a lot more to like about the efficiency than the performance. This is not a dynamic car in any way, shape or form. It feels a bit wallowy, more comfort oriented. The steering is quite vague. The drive doesn't inspire all that much confidence. It doesn't feel all that sporty, which is something to remember for when we hop into the BMW just now. But the efficiency of the BYD is pretty solid. I'll give you an example. The petrol engine features a 60 litre fuel tank, and the battery component of the car is just over 18 kilowatt hours. Now, if you combine those two energy sources, a fully charged battery and a full tank of fuel, BYD claim that you can get over 1,000 kilometers of range. That 18 or so kilowatt hour battery gives you roughly 90 kilometers of all electric range, and depending on how you deploy that range, it could be less or slightly more than that. I think it's pretty impressive. And then we get to the interior. Quality wise, really solid. Not anything to complain about. These seats, although I don't like the color combination, but the seats are very supportive, they're very comfortable. In a similar vein, the quality inside here is more than acceptable. If we are operating under the assumption that this car is going to be roughly 800,000 Rand, I have absolutely no issues with the tangible surfaces here. Every area that I would usually interact with is a nice soft touch material. You can find some poor quality materials, but they're few and far between, and they aren't the areas that you interact with. Then you get the center screen, which is, it pretty much dominates the entire cockpit, right? And in BYD fashion, it rotates, so you can have it as a portrait or a landscape. It's just over 15 inches in total screen size. And then you also get a digitized instrument cluster for good measure, which is relatively configurable. It's giving me my average fuel economy here. It equates to roughly 4.9 liters per 100 kilometers total energy consumption, which is pretty good. I mean, you're going to struggle to achieve much better in even a diesel powered car of this size. Look, in many ways, this is a generic looking SUV. I see some hints of Tesla or just a generic Chinese SUV. There's nothing inspiring about the way it looks, and that's not a bad thing. We get to practicality, another area where the Chinese really excel, and that's in rear occupant space, particularly in this car's case, legroom. There's plenty of legroom, but the problem with this car is because of its roofline, you potentially don't get as much headroom as you might like. And we get to the boot space, and this is an area where I looked at it and I thought, jeepers, look at how big this Sea Lion's boot is compared to that X3. But no, when you actually test the boot size of these two cars, which we've done, the Sea Lion doesn't give as much space as they claim. The brand claims 550 liters, but I've got a feeling the actual usable portion of that boot is not quite as big as they claim it to be. In fact, the BMW offers more usable space. I've really been impressed by it. Well done, BYD. I think this is a very solid product, and if you do bring it in at the price that you claim it to be, it's going to be impressive and it's going to sell well amongst South Africans. Let's hop into the X3, see what it has to offer. I can tell you right now, it's going to have to be really good to beat out the BYD. Don't compete with each other, and as we've said several times in these high-lows, we don't compare the cars directly. We just use cars with a similar philosophy to show you as a consumer what you can get at different price points that offer a broadly similar package. But I can tell you now that X3 is going to have to be exceptional to offer a package that is 500,000 Rand better than this Sea Lion. So here we are aboard the BMW, having hopped straight out of that BYD, and immediately the BMW comes across as the more dynamic of the two cars, and that's not really surprising given the history of BMW making very dynamic cars to drive. The steering has got a lot better feel, the brakes, the throttle modulation, everything across the driving modes just feels slightly better calibrated in here. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows in this new X3, and I'm sure for those of you that have seen other reviews on this car, I get what a lot of the journalists are saying. The interior quality is not exactly what I would expect from a car like this. There's plastic in tangible areas, particularly in this door card area, where they've integrated this new sort of climate switch here where you can alter the airflow, which is also integrated with the ambient lighting cluster and the door handle. It's this big solid chunk of plastic and it doesn't look good. Similarly, below that, where you control where you open and close the door from the handle here and control the window switches, there's also a big lump of hard, shiny plastic, which doesn't feel very good. And then you get to this dashboard, which is an optional extra that you see in a lot of mini products. It's that fabric sort of material, which I can tell you doesn't really age very well if it gets stains on it. And just generally the interior and the quality of the car is not exactly what I had expected from a BMW. That being said, there is other things to really like about this X3. Not quite the same in terms of its range and consumption as the BYD. There is a smaller battery, a 12 kilowatt hour battery. So you've got 2-litre turbocharged petrol engine and a 12 kilowatt hour battery pack and electric motor at the back of the gearbox. Provides you 225 kilowatts and 450 newton meters of torque in a car that weighs just over 2 tons. Now, you may think the performance is relatively similar to what you'd get in that BYD, but I can just tell you, this is a lot more sprightly than that BYD. There might be a smaller battery and only one electric motor, but the acceleration just feels a little bit peppier. From an infotainment perspective, you get the latest BMW operating system, iDrive, just over a 12-inch screen here that's housed within this rectangular curved slab on the dashboard. Digital instrument cluster, very nice. iDrive is among the best systems to use. But when compared to that BYD system, well, this looks quite small, doesn't it? Then we get to practicality in the X3, and this is where the car really surprised me. Rear occupant space is very good. The legroom isn't quite as good as in the BYD, but it's got superior headroom. And despite the fact that the X3 is a slightly smaller car, it seems like the packaging is better, because when you get into the boot, well, they claim 450 liters of boot space, and BYD claims over 550 liters of boot space. And yet the BMW's boot, to my eyes and from my testing, is just superior to the BYD's. It could fit our 3 cases and still have room for more. What about its driving range on that full charge and full tank? Well, the BYD has a 60-litre fuel tank, the BMW a 50-litre fuel tank. BYD's obviously got a smaller turbocharged petrol engine, and BMW's got the 2-litre B48 that powers this car. 50 litres, slightly smaller battery too at 12 kilowatt hours. So you can expect just over 700 k's of range in this X3. And when you look at it and you look at the two cars back to back, you have to really want a premium car and a premium badge in your garage to justify, if you just want a plug-in hybrid, to justify buying this 30e X3. If it was my money at least, and I wanted an X3, it wouldn't be this hybrid I get. It would probably be the 50 with the 6-cylinder turbocharged petrol engine, or the 20D if I wanted fuel consumption. You see, this X3, as I mentioned, is more dynamic to drive, but with that dynamism comes a firm ride quality. Because this is an M Sport model, you can get a slightly cheaper non-M Sport derivative, but most people are going to opt for the M Sports, and this car rides on 20-inch wheels. And because it's got a big battery over that rear axle, the rear end of the car feels very firmly sprung compared to that BYD, and well, compared to what you'd really want from a car in the segment. I mean, if you are after something a bit firmer and you want something that's a little bit better for a driving enthusiast, then this is a better option. But for the most part, from a comfort and usability perspective, that BYD is better than this X3. From a dynamic perspective, the X3 is better, but I cannot believe there's a 500,000 Rand price gulf between the two cars. I have specifically heard people saying that they don't like the look of this car. Personally, I don't mind it, but I think it could have been slightly more conservative, considering this is BMW's most important car at the moment. It's their best-selling product. It is effectively the new 3 Series, because the global automotive audience looks at SUVs as the new vehicle of choice, and this being the X3, this is effectively the spiritual successor that will carry the torch forward for BMW. So if I had to choose one between the two cars, it's quite obvious. I think I would go home with the BYD, and I think that may come as a shock to some people, but I simply couldn't justify a 500,000 Rand price premium for this X3 over that BYD. And honestly, I don't think you have people within the automotive market that are looking at an X3 that are going to abandon their idea of buying a premium SUV, whether that be a Mercedes-Benz GLC or an X3, and go and buy a BYD. I think it's a different target audience. And in a similar vein, if you're shopping for a Sea Lion 6, you're probably also looking at a Toyota RAV4 hybrid and not an X3. So again, it's not a pure comparison between the two cars. But if I had to choose, having driven those cars back to back today, considering the price, for me, it's really difficult to not side with the BYD. And that's going to do it for this episode of High Low. It's always difficult to choose a winner in these comparisons because these two cars don't actually compete with each other. One is at a higher price, one's at a lower price. But I suppose if we've learned one thing, it's the fact that the plug-in hybrid certainly has a place on South African roads as an alternative to low fuel consumption petrol and diesel vehicles. The other thing we've gleaned from this exercise is that BYD can make a hell of a plug-in hybrid. If it can hold its own against the likes of a BMW X3, it showcases that the brand has definitely got a future here in South Africa. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the AutoTrader YouTube channel. We really appreciate your support. And if you have enjoyed this content, leave us a like, comment below, let us know what you'd like us to compare next. Until next time, cheers.